The Holocaust was one of the deadliest times in history. They killed many Jews during this period of time, and it all started with Hitler. He needed someone to blame for the fall of Germany. So, he picked the Jews, who did nothing wrong, of course, but he picked them anyway. Many of these concentration camps where he sent the Jews, and where many of them were killed, were from Poland, and that's where they built most of the concentration camps were in Poland. Germany took over Poland, and of course they built it, and they killed the Jews. At this time, when they began mass building it, there was thousands of square miles of controlled land by Germany. Most of mainland Europe at this time was controlled by Germany, so putting it in Poland, outside of the German, it was in the land of inferior people, basically, in their eyes. By the end of 1941, you had several 100,000 Jews at this time were killed, and then millions and millions were working at this time. You had West Africa, mainland Europe. Most of Asia was controlled by the Axis powers. By 1942, 1.2 million Jews were killed, and this was over a course of a decade. Horrific already. At this time, they also began experimenting on the Jews because they wanted to enhance German lives and then help make it better for the Germans, find new cures for Germans. A big company, Bayer, a recognized company today, were a huge part of the experiments and killed thousands of Jews, thousands of disabled people, thousands of old people, thousands of autistic people, most likely killing close to 100,000 people. The Nazis said, "Way to go, Bayer, continue." And so, of course, Bayer was not the only company that did this, but they're the only company that's still around today that did it. And they were probably the biggest part of it, of the experimentations on the Jews. Auschwitz was the most known of all concentration camps. Almost anybody, no matter who you are, have heard of the name Auschwitz. It was known for its brutality and the thousands that it killed. Concentration camps were very brutal places, and there's no word that can describe it. Horrific isn't good enough. And it left permanent scars on the Jews that survived, because for them, they lost many people, whether it was from the crematories, whether it was from gas or being shot. They would have lost their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers, their best friends through this experience, and that's something that they would never forget. Towards the end of World War II, the Germans burned the careful records they kept of the Jews they killed. They began just annihilating the Jews. Within half a year, they had killed more Jews than an entire decade. The entire death toll is hard to know, and we will probably never know the exact death toll. But the death toll was estimated to be at around 11 million dead. A good chunk of that during the final few months of the Germans. Most of these were Polish, and this is probably the worst time to be alive during this time, of course, especially if you were a Jew. Many of these Jews came from Poland, of course, like I said already, but they came from places like Yugoslavia, Roman, Czechoslovakia, Hungarian, or German, or of course other Soviets. 30% of the Holocaust deaths were not Jews, of course, but the death toll of the Jews were 11 million, so add on 30%, and that brings it up to like 15 million nearly. Some of them were politics that got in the Nazis' way, and some of them were Soviet prisoners of war. There's just, like I said, no words to describe how awful this was, and this is history that shall never be forgotten. The Germans did something so awful that it can be forgiven, but you should never forget it. The famous quote, of course, is, "If you forget history, you are doomed to repeat," and this is not something that we'd want to repeat ever. Ever. Please watch my other videos, like, and subscribe.